You know that feeling when everything just clicks? Your mind is sharp, your mood is steady, your body feels like it's firing on all cylinders. That's not luck, that's what your body is capable of every single day. Now, I've looked into a lot of fish oil supplements, and honestly, most of them are mystery sourced, overprocessed, blasted with heat, and packed with synthetic add-ins. But this one is different. Omega-3 Rejuvenate from Big Bold Health starts with wild Alaskan salmon and cod, sustainably caught from some of the cleanest waters on the planet, and then it's processed at low temperatures to preserve what actually matters. We're talking about real omega-3s, naturally occurring vitamins A and D, and pro-resolving mediators, or PRMs, that help your body balance its own immune response. What does that mean for you? Clearer thinking, more stable mood, and real nature-based support for your heart and immune system. No shortcuts, no synthetic nonsense. And it was developed by Dr. Jeffrey Bland, a true pioneer in the world of complementary health. If you want to feel the difference, go to bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman. That's bigboldhealth.com/Hoffman and use code Hoffman for 20% off site-wide. Once you feel it, you'll know. Welcome to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman. Today we're going to talk about functional diagnostic nutrition and functional testing. Now, this is an important area within integrative medicine because sometimes we practitioners of integrative medicine like to use different types of tests than conventional doctors. We're going to talk to an expert in his field. In fact, he's the founder of FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. He is Reed Davis. He's a board-certified holistic health practitioner, and he's a certified nutritional therapist. He's founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, and he has an FDN certification course with over 4,000 graduates in 50 countries, looking for ways to better address sometimes the complex, not obvious problems of their clients and patients. He's served as the health director at a wellness center in Southern California for over 10 years. He is also on the advisory board of the American Natural Wellness Coaches Board and the American Association of Natural Wellness Coaches. We talked a little bit about the role of health coaches a little later, but welcome, Reed. It's a pleasure having you on Intelligent Medicine. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Ronald. It's a pleasure to be here, speak to the audience about what you mentioned and anything else you want to discuss in the health space. I guess we'll keep it there.
Yeah.
But
in your prelude with me,
Yes,
you
sir.
said that you were kind of a point-and-shoot expert that can address many different kinds of health issues. So we'll get around to that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the limitations of the conventional workup and where FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition, and functional testing can sometimes reveal hidden health problems that are not addressed by conventional testing. So maybe, start on that theme, because typically I'm an MD, and, the tools that we have available, we have, you can do a CBC, we can do, to look at blood counts, we can look at a so-called chemistry panel, SMA 18, we can sometimes add here and there, like some hormonal tests, but it's pretty limited sometimes in disclosing the true cause of a patient's malaise. So what does your type of testing reveal?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really important that people go, first of all, to their conventional or traditional or what I call standard medicine to make sure nothing really, contracted is happening. If you're going downhill fast, you need standard medicine. You need someone that can recognize that downward spiral and intervene with heroic type medicine, which, standard medicine is well known for. So in other words, if you come off a plane from West Africa and your temperature's 105 and you're bleeding from your eyeballs, you're not going to call your nutritionist. You're going to go for the best standard care available. Go to the
You mean
hospital.
Ebola is not amenable to homeopathic medicine or diet modification?
That's what I'm saying. And so the observations that we make, moving, I'm going to tell you about the other labs. So there's other labs, but to capitalize on the data, we need time. So in functional diagnostic nutrition, that's the name I gave. I'd actually been doing it for 10 years without giving it a name. And when I started teaching, I had to kind of name, well, what is it you teach? So I came up with that phrase, and I've been slammed for it ever since.
Well, so what does that entail? So, for example,
And looking for
you will
diagnosis.
let's talk the adrenals, for example.
Okay.
My schooling in adrenal function is there are three states of the adrenal. Way too high, in which case you're in serious trouble. That's adrenal hyperplasia, which causes very sky high levels of cortisol, and the patient can develop a stroke, high blood pressure. It's a medical emergency. Then there's on the low end, there's Addison's disease, and patients are completely exhausted, debilitated. They immediately need high dose steroids, and then everything in between is normal. How does your approach differentiate from conventional medicine's approach?
Well, people could be considered normal from that perspective, that they're not sort of failing these standard labs, but we can look a little bit closer, correlate the test results with the person who feels like crap. So it's very difficult to tell a person who feels like crap everything looks normal, because because they're in between the range that you just spoke of, they would be called normal by standard. We'd say there's something dysfunctional. Let's see what it is, and we look at more than just cortisol. For one thing, I think your listeners might be interested to know that cortisol is only half of the equation. That's the catabolic hormone. That's the hormone that helps your body break down. And it's supposed to. You're supposed to replace old cells with new cells. You catabolize, it's half of metabolism, catabolism, catabolic hormone, which we could look at through cortisol. Now, the other half is the anabolic, it's the building up. So we always look at the two and find out that even though their cortisol might be quote unquote normal to a standard physician, guess what? It's out of proportion to the DHEA. So you're in a catabolic state. You want to be in a balanced state. So that's one of the first, things we differentiate. Where are you? And guess what? When you explain that to someone, you show them their test results. By the way, we can use saliva, urine, wet urine, dried urine, and blood, but mostly we use saliva because it's convenient and affordable and easy to do in one's own home, and anyone can do it. You don't need
And
to be a
there's an
physician.
additional advantage to saliva I've found because the so-called spit test, because isn't it true that there is what's called a circadian rhythm of your adrenals? It's a very, very sharp deviation from what you might have, when the alarm clock rings or when you wake up on your own with the sunrise, versus what's supposed to happen when you're trying to get your Z's later at night. And that has a big impact on your
Absolutely.
mood, energy, and ability
Yes.
to sleep.
You're so right. You get this catabolic to anabolic balance, and you find out that the circadian rhythm is off because you can do this test 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day if you want. You wouldn't do that with blood. No one's going to go get a venipuncture in 4 times over a day, morning, noon, afternoon, night. No one's going to do that. So the cool thing about saliva is or the spit test as you call it, it's the bioavailable time specific levels of cortisol. And you could look at DHA as much as you want there too. We just compare the morning cortisol and DHA. But so now you have catabolic, anabolic balance. You have the morning, noon, afternoon, and nighttime. So with the simple saliva test, you're looking at a lot of data that could be instructive for that person. There's no cohorts in FDN. There's only in studies of one person. So we really spend a lot of time clinically correlating the test results. And I like the way you're jumping in and getting more specific, because I talk in generalities a lot depending on the audience. But yeah, I love doing the circadian rhythm, catabolic to anabolic balance. And oh, by the way, as long as you're testing and you're getting the samples, let's look at their testosterone, their progesterone, their estrogens, the sex hormones. they're mostly derivatives of DHA anyway. And so
Mhm.
now you've got the catabolic anabolic balance, you've got the circadian rhythm problems there, you got the sex hormones, you got problems and imbalances there. And on the same saliva test, Doc, I don't know if you know this, we're looking at secretory IgA. So now we're getting
Okay.
a window into the
That
immune system
that's an
because with
important
high
one.
cortisol,
Yeah.
yeah, with high cortisol, you're driving down the immune system. If you're stressed out all the time, those people have weaker immune systems. Why? Secretory IgA.
I
It's
think
the
that that's a
main.
test that a lot of our listeners are not acquainted with. So, we talk about immunoglobulins, and there's several. I mean, if you have an high IgE, you're very allergic, or
Yeah.
alternatively, you may have parasites. If you have a low IgG, you're very vulnerable to certain types of infections. But what is IGA? I mean, here in New York, it's a supermarket chain, or it used to be. I think maybe it's defunct. It got
Yeah,
taken over, the IGA.
that's a good one. I
But
haven't heard that one in 10 years.
Yeah,
But
but
so,
yeah, that dates
yeah.
me. But so what is it's sometimes abbreviated Sig A. So that, and you could derive that from saliva. What uh what does that give you a
Yes.
snapshot of?
So it's a snapshot of the immunity in the small intestine, the gut, so to speak.
Hmm.
And where is most of your immune system? It's in the gut. And what's the predominant immunoglobulin? That, in other words, defense molecules or chemicals? It's secretory or secretory, if you're from Canada, secretory IgA, immunoglobulin A. So there's, A, D, E, and others, M. And we look at different ones for different reasons. But man, on that same saliva test, and that's what I'm talking about, the convenience, you can get a lot of data. And you know what else we look at on that test is melatonin. We take that from the noon saliva sample. So you get morning,
Hmm.
noon, afternoon, night. You would look at the rhythm, but you could look at different other hormones depending on whether you want to look at them morning, noon, afternoon, or night.
Well, let's
So
let's
like
let's
a
let's
high,
double click on cortisol, for example. So,
okay,
I mean, there's several scenarios. Uh, you know, it's kind of like Goldilocks. Too high, too low, just right. And so let's look at the example that I see a lot in my New York patients: highly stressed. They're holding down multiple jobs. They're trying to also go out to a lot of entertainment. They're not sleeping a lot. They have high cortisol. It starts high, it stays high through the day, and it doesn't remit at night. What type of solution might you have for that? Because it's like, whoa, you got to chill out. Maybe move to San Diego where you
yeah.
live and relax.
I was going to say the similar thing. Oh, they must be from New York. They just need to change their ways. So it's not so easy. But if your cortisol is highly driven, and so it's your adrenal glands producing this cortisol, if they're responding appropriately to all that stress, well, then you might actually be in pretty good shape. You might be able
Okay.
to coast for a while. But if you're starting to feel a downward spiral, if it's not working for you anymore, if you're self-medicating, if you're drinking a ton of coffee in the morning and then at nighttime you have to drink alcohol or something to relax, that's a sign, that's a symptom, that's a signal that something's wrong. So you might be able to crank out high cortisol
Yeah.
morning and after night, but not forever. And one day you're going to pay the piper.
Hmm.
And so when we find that, we call that acute. You would call that acute phase yourself.
Hmm.
Um, well, that person has to look at their life if it's causing them problems. If they say, hey, I used to be able to do this and it didn't bother me. Now I feel crummy and I'm self-medicating. Well, let's take a look at it. So that's where the health coaching comes in.
It
That's not a
sounds like
medical
what you're
condition.
referring to, and I'm sure you're aware of this in your training, is this called this GAS, the General Adaptation Syndrome. It's a model by Hans Selye, which is like, okay, you can be stressed and you can adapt to the stress by cranking out more stress hormones, but you can only do it so long before you have to pay the piper, because eventually your adrenals get exhausted. And then you go to the next scenario, which is like, oh my God, I checked this person's cortisol, and they're barely making cortisol. And oh, by the way, they're coming in with a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, or post Lyme syndrome, or fibromyalgia, or vaccine reaction, you name it. I mean, these are exhausted people.
Sure. Well, you get exhausted people. There could be a lot of reasons why. And one of the first things we check are the hormones through the saliva testing. Get that cortisol to DHEA, all the circadian rhythm, the sex hormones. You find out the same people have low testosterone, especially staying up late at night. That's not good for humans. And you'll end up with, and then you have low libido. You can't put on muscle in the gym. So you're more than uh, ready for an FDN practitioner. But again, if you go to standard medicine, they may look at your CBC, chem panels, differentials, and metabolic panels, and go, "Hey, it looks pretty good, not too bad. Maybe
Yeah.
your cholesterol is a little high because you don't eat right, and they want to put you on medication." And
Well,
that's
actually,
up
but
to
they might default to the diagnosis of depression in that case. I see that very often as they say, well, you're
oh,
feeling kind of
sure,
tired. Let's pep you up. We'll give you
you're
Effexor
just
or
depressed.
something like that. Because
Yeah,
this is a typical sign of depression. You're tired all the time. You're complaining a lot. Especially a woman. A woman who complains a lot is often considered, a kind of a hypochondriacal depressive. So they get a
I'm
medication.
just keeping my mouth shut on that topic. I'm
Well,
not going
I
there.
can I as an MD I can critique my own profession quite with
You know,
impunity.
I
With impunity.
Yes,
So
I agree, and I always look for the harmony, the way to work together, and that person, by all observers, you'd have to admit, is their problems aren't from an effects deficiency. That's there's no such thing as that. There might be deficient in something else, and it could just be exercise, sleep. It could be the right diet. It could
mhm.
be, they could take some supplements to supplement their bad diet, things like that. So there's lots of ways to go with coaching versus diagnosing and treating specific things.
Kids don't just bring home homework, they bring home germs. And those germs don't just stay with them, they spread to the whole household. That's why Clear Nasal Spray was created by a practicing physician to give parents and grandparents peace of mind. You may not think about it, but your nose is filtering out a semi-truck full of air every single day. Clear isn't just another spray. It creates an additional layer of protection in your nose that blocks bacteria and viruses before they can even take hold. Yes, even that virus. Supporting your body's defenses right where germs first try to enter. Clear is a hygiene product recommended for daily use, drug-free, non-drowsy, and safe for all ages. Just a quick spray in the morning and evening helps you cleanse your nose. Don't just hope for protection, create it. Get Clear Nasal Spray, your daily defense. Clear Nasal Spray is available at retailers nationwide and online. Check out xlear.com for our special offers. That's xlear.com.
What are some of your favorite treatments for, say, let's take both cases. Like, on one hand, high cortisol, excessive cortisol, really like a stressed out person. Yeah, I know there's some lifestyle elements to it, but like better sleep and meditation and stress reduction. But in terms of herbs or vitamins or supplements, and then on the other hand, for the person who really needs a boost to their adrenal function, what are some of the
Sure.
options?
And that's the more common scenario in our world because people with high cortisol, then they're still in pretty good shape. They're still fighting it. They start to feel something's wrong. They usually start to self-medicate. If the symptoms get bad enough, they'll go get some real medication. But most people come to us in the more fatigued or that sort of exhaustive state. And that's the ones that we can help the most because we can straighten out not just their hormones, but their immune system, their digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system balance. And so that's the system that if the end is, I don't want to sell my program or everything, but what I've noticed as a holistic health practitioner is if you don't work on everything, working on one thing just doesn't help enough. That's why people go from one doctor to another. They go from the gastroenterologist to the neurologist to the whatever it might be, endocrinologist for different looks at different problems and with different medications. And so we, as holistic practitioners, know that you can outperform that with a system that looks at multiple healing opportunities. This is a key phrase, multiple healing opportunities. There's lots of things going on. You don't need one diagnosis. You need to understand this, I call it the hidden, HIDDEN. I just told you what that was: hormone, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system.
Hmm.
HIDDEN. Look, as many healing opportunities as possible, doc. Then, do we treat one thing? No, they've done that already. They've already had one test for the gut. No, it's parasites. Let's get rid of them. You'll be fine. No, you won't. No, you won't. It's the terrain that matters, and on and all the things, how you live. And so our formula for success, no matter what the condition is DRESS. That's diet, right for their type, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplementation. So that covers epigenetics. It covers the things to do, not to treat one thing, but to treat everything. Nothing specifically, everything non-specifically. So every cell, tissue, organ, system, entire organism is up leveled, and it's because, again, diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplement. Those are the things we have control over. Most people in our world have lived themselves into their problem, whether it be the blood sugar issues, the immune system issues, and all the things. I mean, we did get whacked with this little thing that went around a couple of years ago, but generally speaking, it's this uh, whole constellation of healing opportunities and applying the principles of health building to every cell, tissue, organ, and system. So we look at the HIDDEN, we apply the DRESS principles, and people simply get better. It does require life changes. It does require you to eat better, go to bed on time, do some more exercise or less. For some people, believe it or not, less exercise. And stress reduction runs the gamut of mental, emotional, psychospiritual, physical trauma, chemical exposure, biochemical issues and imbalances and things. And then, of course, supplementation, because food isn't high quality like it used to be when I grew up in Canada, even though I've been in California 30 years. Both my grandfathers grew their own food.
Hmm.
I ate some really good food as a kid. I think it's what I don't look 90, do I?
No, not a
I'm
day
kidding.
over. Not a day over.
No, I'm 70, but a lot of the longevity and the youthfulness comes from when I was young. Everything was organic. Everything was real rich in minerals and vitamins and essential fatty acids and antioxidants and all the other things, trace elements, phytonutrients. So anyway, so we know what DRESS should be. It's how can you get each individual to actually do it. That is where the health coaching comes in. And lastly, in our book, there's no here, take this for 3 months and we'll retest. It's here. This is what we recommend you do for 3 months. We're willing to work with you during that time period, as long as you keep following the program. And if we have to start repeating ourselves, then program's over.
So in regard to adrenal function, there are a lot of what are so-called adaptogens. Can you speak to those? Because that's the
Oh,
S, I
sure.
think, in the
Yeah.
paradigm that you just
So
mentioned.
these are helpful to, they won't reverse anything. You need to find out what the stressor is. You can't supplement your way out of your health problem if you don't also eat right and go to bed and rest. And by the way, you can rest during the day. You can do things, as you mentioned, the meditation, power naps, lots of things that have been. The exercise goes without saying. It's kind of not exercising is the new smoking I've heard. And the stress reduction could be more than just that you're eating crappy food. That's stressful, but the air you breathe and the electromagnetic frequencies and just on and on and on. Physical aches and pains, which is my personal, I've got a well-used body. So sports injuries and extreme sports injuries and motorcycles and all kinds of things. I have a well-used body. So pain is also a stressor. And so the way to adaptogens only are effective when you know that, hey, they're just there for a little boost. They can,
Mhm.
there's two ways to look at it. One is to extend the half-life of cortisol, like licorice root does that,
Mhm.
because when you have real low cortisol, you could be tired. You're not responding appropriately. You could have blood sugar problems. Most of our clients do. And so you may want to extend the half-life of cortisol. There is ways to shut it down, but we don't recommend that very much. It's more find out what the stressor is
Mhm.
and lower. Phosphatidylcholine can lower your cortisol, but why would you do that? Just find out why it's high. It could be high, And this is another thing that's cool. And stop me anytime because I will go on. When you have
okay.
high morning, that's normal. You want high morning.
That's your wake up call. That's your net. Otherwise, you wouldn't get out of bed. You just turn over and pull the covers over your head, right?
Yeah, you might have to go make someone breakfast or
yeah,
something like that. But in the morning, you want the cortisol. Now, by noon, it should have leveled off, lowered just a little bit.
Yeah.
But what if it's real high at noon? That's not normal. Why would it be high at noon? Well, you could have got slapped around in the morning, physically abused. You could be eating something that you're sensitive to. You could have a parasite, bacteria, fungus, virus that's driving the cortisol. Things like so. We love looking at that rhythm, and we try to figure out. It's like being a health detective.
So what I appreciate, Reed, what I appreciate about what you're saying is, I'm soliciting, what kind of pill can you take? Conventional doctors prescribe pills, and integrative doctors prescribe their pills. What you're saying is that, these things, these supplements may help, but they cannot substitute for integral lifestyle changes that address the imbalances that you find in the testing, so that sleep, environmental toxins, diet, exercise, too much or too little. All these can figure into an imbalance.
Sure.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Let me give you a really quick case study that happened 20 years ago, which taught me a lot that I was on the right track.
Can we tease to part two? Can we tease to part two? Because our listeners know we divide our podcast into two parts. And I want to hear that case study. Coming up, we'll talk about, a case study that kind of illustrates the principles of FDN, functional diagnostic nutrition. Our guest is Reed Davis, board-certified holistic health practitioner and developer of this paradigm, which is really kind of embodies essentially the integrative medicine approach to health challenges. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast.